welcome to the Stained Glass Museum's 2020 lecture. My name is Jasmine Allen, Director of the Stained Glass Museum, and I'm delighted to welcome you all this evening. Over 140 people have signed up to our lecture this evening, which I think might be a record, and I can see the numbers going up. We've got over 100 here this evening, so that's fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Sorry we were a little bit late. We were just checking the technology, but we've got it all working, I hope. We are very grateful this evening that Helen Whittaker has agreed to talk to us. This talk was originally planned to take place in Ely Cathedral, but unfortunately we haven't been able to meet in person this evening. But the great news is that I hope people are joining us from all over. Finally, what you're all here for, to welcome our guest speaker this evening, Helen. So Helen, welcome. Helen Whittaker is Creative Director to Barley Studio in York. Helen is an award-winning designer, not only of stained glass windows, but also architectural sculpture in glass and copper, with over 100 commissions in prestigious ecclesiastical and secular buildings across the UK. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, in recent years, Helen has worked in collaboration with artists such as David Hockney, creating a new window for Westminster Abbey. And in 2019, and hopefully Helen can move on the slide for me now, she was also selected to help promote the government's international Great Britain campaign. So over the last decades, Helen has made a great contribution to the art of stained glass, both in preserving the craft through conservation and in creating new stained glass art. So we're delighted to welcome Helen this evening to share with us some of the key projects, influences and themes in her artistic journey in stained glass so far. So Helen, over to you. There we go. Right on time. The craft is great, which is a fantastic testament to the importance of stained glass art in this country. So you've heard enough from me, and I'm going to hand over to our speaker, Helen. I will disappear for a while and come back at the end when we do questions. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. So good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here speaking to the Stained Glass Museum, its friends and other supporters to this event. I thought I'd guide you through my artistic journey by dividing my talk into 4 parts this evening. Things which have inspired or influenced my work, my creative process with the 7 points I consider when designing for stained glass, working with 2 Royal Academy painters, Hughie O'Donoghue and David Hockney, and then I'd like to finish with some recent works. So let's begin with inspirations and influences which have guided my stained glass journey. From an early age, both art and craft played an important role in my upbringing. And with my mum, I regularly visited galleries and museums and experienced a wide variety of art from all periods. My father was a craftsman, and he came from a long line of cabinet makers and blacksmiths. And I think he's the reason why I loved making things. However, when I was younger, some pictures stood out. In particular, the figurative work of Italian painters such as the medieval artist Giotto and the 20th century artist Modigliani. I've selected these paintings in particular as I like their simplicity of line and colour, and on reflection, their similarities to stained glass. As an art student, I was also excited by pictures that caught your attention with a strong narrative or storytelling. And then there's the movement these paintings create and their use of light and dark. In the works of Vermeer and female painter Gentileschi, their paintings made me feel like I was in that moment, witnessing something happening. In Gentileschi's painting of Susanna and the Elders, a naked Susanna reveals her vulnerability. In Vermeer's painting, I feel like a spectator. The tapestry and the chair drawing me in to this intimate scene. My other love is sculpture, especially the work of Rodin. His work is full of character, realism and feeling, and it's enlivened through the play of light and dark. So on reflection, I see that all these elements are important. We have line and colour, light and dark, form and shape, and narrative and storytelling, and all have the power to draw us in and make us interested, as well as connecting us to tragedy, love, or curiosity. My first introduction to stained glass was at Sunderland University, where I studied a BA in glass and ceramics. From there, I was awarded a scholarship for an MA course in the Visual Islamic and Traditional Arts at the Prince's School of Architecture, where I studied arts and crafts from all over the world, including calligraphy, icon painting, and stone carving. The founder of the school, Prince Charles, is a passionate advocate of the art and craft. And I'm very pleased to say he's also the patron of the Stained Glass Museum. Another equally important special person to me was the director of the course, Professor Keith Critchlow. He was an architect, a painter, a leading expert in sacred geometry and architecture. And as you see in the slide, Keith sought geometry everywhere, from a simple flower to the construction of the finest paintings in history. Keith Critchlow was amazing, and his teachings have had a vast influence on my thinking and development throughout my career. Whilst I was studying, I also decided to get some work experience in leading stained glass studios, including the Barley Studio here in York, where I worked alongside conservator Keith Barley and his team. One of my first conservation projects was this fantastic dome window, part of the complete glazing scheme at St Mary's Church in Fairford, Gloucestershire. Here, I learned many skills needed in stained glass restoration and conservation, from site work to studio work, with my specialism being restoration painting, which I still practice and oversee today. At the beginning of my career, I felt fortunate to be able to study this glass in close detail, to look and to learn from the great mastery involved in the design and creation of these stunning windows. And what was wonderful about this window was that I could also see the teachings of my tutor, Keith Critchlow, with sacred geometry defined by concentric circles radiating from the heart of Christ. And so to my own creative work. I predominantly work on commissions for both secular and ecclesiastical buildings. And I enjoy this way of working as each project brings its own set of challenges to which I have to find a solution. And I usually consider 7 main points to help me with this process. And these points influence the style of my windows, whether they are geometric, figurative, abstract, symbolic, representational, or sculptural. And I'd now like to take the opportunity to explain each of these points with a piece of work I was commissioned to do. The first thing I had to consider was the architectural space selected for the window, illustrated here by one of my first projects after graduating from the Prince's School, and coincidentally at Ely Cathedral, home of the Stained Glass Museum. Ely Cathedral's Millennium Project was to reinstate the link between the 14th century Lady Chapel and the east end of the cathedral, restoring the original walkway used by the medieval monks. The brief of the project was to produce a design that was sympathetic to the surroundings and incorporating donor inscriptions, symbols of the Virgin Mary, and those of Ely Cathedral. You see here that my windows are based on geometric principles, inspired by the medieval grisaille glazing and their typical colouring. A geometric pattern moves through the windows, encouraging us to move through the new processional way. My second point is, what is the window for and who's it for? Some of my commissions are in memory of a loved one. This small window is a memorial to a young man who tragically lost his life in Tanzania. The image reflects his personal story set within a Christian context. The design reflects the 7 days of creation as described in the book of Genesis. And in the window, I've selected silhouetted depictions of birds and fish, flora and animals, all associated with East Africa. The exception being Ned's dash sound in the lower yellow band. The design radiates out in 7 circles, from the formless and empty in the centre to the inscription at the top of the window, which tells us on the 7th day, and then he rested. Prince Charles selected this window as one of 100 artworks to be exhibited at Buckingham Palace for his 70th birthday celebrations. My third point concerns light. This commission was the result of a competition to commemorate 90 years of the Royal Air Force in the prestigious secular setting of the RAF Club in London. The window looks into a dark light well filled with fire escapes and drain pipes, the only daylight seeping down the light well to illuminate the top of the window. To combat this, I introduced gilded glass to the base of the window, which used the reflected light from within the building. I applied metal leaf, gold, silver and copper for different colours, using gelatine to the outside face of the clear and tinted glasses. You can see this metallic effect here in the eagle of the RAF Club crest and in the background to the figure at the bottom of the window. The staircase window is designed to work from 2 viewpoints, from the ground floor and the balcony above. At the base of the window, you can see a 1940s scrambling pilot moving towards a modern day pilot climbing into a Harrier jet. And to the right, searchlights scan the sky with the iconic airborne Lancaster bomber above. Filling the top of the window is the circular radar display, which also acts as the moon, referencing the RAF motto, Per Ardua ad Astra, through struggle to the stars. Within the radar segments are set iconic small-scale images associated with the RAF's history. And this detailed imagery was a particular challenge as all the elements had to be historically accurate. And I was very fortunate to have the support of several members of the RAF Club Arts Committee who checked my artwork at every stage to make sure that all of these images were correct. My fourth point is the history of the building, demonstrated by another window in the RAF Club, celebrating women's role in the history of the RAF. And what's interesting about this commission is that these windows are located in the former anteroom to the ladies' bar and lounge, the only part of the club where women were allowed until the 1960s. The 2 windows show details of activities that were undertaken by women during the 2 World Wars and onto the present day. From the operations room clock and the typewriter in the left-hand window, to the Merlin helicopter and the Hercules and Tornado aircraft on the right. My inspiration for this design came from the graphic idiom of World War II and World War II poster art. And for me, one of the best poster girls from this period is Rosie the Riveter, who became the symbolic of the women who were holding the Air Force together. So the imagery displayed in these 2 windows is brought together and united by a linear pattern of circles, representing the pattern of rivets as seen on an old aeroplane. Looking closer, these rivets are actually glass lenses. And when looking through them, you can see images from the past, the important roles women provided in support of the Air Force. The original photograph images were printed on a second layer of glass behind the lenses by Processional Studio. And these windows were unveiled by Her Majesty the Queen, herself a member of the Auxiliary Territorial Service during the war. And at this special unveiling, the Queen told us that she still knows how to strip down and rebuild a car engine. My fifth point to consider is about the people who use the building, shown here at St Mary's Church and Community Centre, Bramall Lane in Sheffield. This place of worship has now a dual function. During the week, it's active with numerous social groups, with the east end of the church reserved for devotional events. My stained glass window, on the theme of 21st century pilgrimage, is flanked by two life-size sculptures. And they were created to act as a link between us and the window. The female figure on the left gestures towards the window, pointing us towards the images and symbols of pilgrimage in the stained glass. The male figure on the right holds his hands close to his heart and invites us to meditate and reflect on what we see in the window. I previously explored the idea of pilgrimage at Beverley Minster, using copper sculpture, stained glass and furnishings. And as you can see in this image at St Mary's, I've used this theme again with sculptures being created with copper triangular shapes. These shapes represent the Trinity, the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. And you will see that the triangles actually join together to create more detailed imagery, such as the faces and hands, showing us all that we are all made in the image of God. The dedication service was very special, as the former and recently retired Archbishop of York, Dr. John Sentamu, carried out the service and also played his bongo drums. And now for something completely different. The same point to consider, but in this case designed for an architectural practice. The window, created for an internal door, celebrates the client's love of Woolley. He's a Scotsman, and the Italian architect Carla Scarpa. I love the challenge of bringing these three elements together, with Woolley happily seated in one of Scarpa's impressive architectural settings, all within this internal door. The sixth point to consider are any structural issues, and this may be dull to some, but key to the survival of stained glass and movable sculptures. My prayer tree, in the shape of a sycamore seed, needed to be structurally sound for the hanging of prayers, and it also needed to be movable around the hospital chapel. The sculpture is created from copper, brass, opaque and translucent glasses and copper foil. And this was a project which brought a lot of emotion with it, as the prayer tree is for those with loved ones who are being treated in hospital. My final point relates to two recent collaborations with celebrated fine artists, Hughie O'Donoghue and David Hockney, who have both designed windows for Westminster Abbey. Both artists looked and considered other stained glass windows which were next to the space that they were going to design for. And interestingly, they both then created something completely different. Hughie chose to use a predominantly blue and white colour scheme, incorporating Marian symbols of lilies and stars. From his initial design, Hughie created a series of full-size paintings, and then we worked together to capture faithfully the spirit and style of his designs in glass. I wanted it to be so true to his work that I even used Hughie's own brushes, applying various coloured glass paints and enamels to the glass with damar varnish, allowing me to intensify the colours with several layers of paint. The glass was then heated in a kiln to 650 degrees Celsius. Hughie's windows were designed to complement the golden tones of the surrounding stonework. His bold use of colour and shape are a variation on heraldic banners hanging beneath the windows. His design also follows the rectangular lines of the original late medieval iron support bars. These new windows were completed and installed by Barley Studio team for the service celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Queen's coronation in June 2013. My second collaboration is with David Hockney. Having used the iPad to create many arts of work previously, David felt it was the perfect medium to design for stained glass because both are viewed by transmitted light. To the right is the iPad image of the window design drawn over a photograph of the previous clear glazed window. To assist with the design and development, I was invited to stay with David in California to ensure that the leading divisions of the design would work with the support structure required for the window. And here is the window laid out for the final checks and the finished work in situ. Hockney's design depicts a country scene featuring hawthorn blossom, which he described as a celebration reflecting the Queen as a countrywoman and her great love of the countryside. The glass used in the window was provided by Lambert's, with the pink and red specially made for this project. And the pink colour, now known as the Hockney pink, is prized as it gets its colour from the metal gold. The window is unique in the Abbey as it uses no glass paint, only the glass and lead to create the artwork. And it's similar to Matisse's window at Chapelle de Vence in France. In fact, the only painted piece in the window is Hockney's signature at the bottom right of the window, which was flown to Los Angeles to be signed in glass paint and then flown back to York to be fired in the kiln. This was an amazing opportunity and experience for me to work alongside David Hockney and his team, and it's a memory that will truly stay with me forever. I'd like to end with some recent works. As a result of my involvement with the Great Britain campaign, I was invited to submit an artwork for the Detour Creative Festival East Meets West in Hong Kong. And this exhibition piece celebrates the continuing history of the Hawthorne Mansion, the home of the Tiger Balm, which has moved into a new era as centre for music. I chose to signify this using their famous moon gate as a central focus of the design, as the full moon marks a new beginning in the lunar calendar. Layered over the architectural structure, 5 planets are depicted alongside the sun and the earth, in colours linked to the 5 elements of traditional Chinese culture. The piece is created in 2 layers of flashed glass that's etched, stained and painted and then plated together. Another recent work was certainly a leap of faith on my part, with the technique of glass fusing as the main focus. Last year, I attended a glass fusing workshop in Maryland, USA, with Narcissus Quagliata, and learnt about his particular techniques, creating material from individual glass elements, which then then can be used and fused again. From this, I decided to incorporate the disciplines of fusing with those of traditional stained glass for a recent commission back in the UK. And I was able to do this successfully with the help of Narcissus and the Judson Studios in California. The window is the memorial to a member of the Worsley family, the tree signifying the stewardship which is needed for the Worsley estate to continue. And William Worsley was very supportive with my idea to explore this design using representational and abstract imagery. So the combination of fusing and traditional painted glass seemed an ideal solution. Back at Barley Studio, I created the remainder of the window, including the owl and the woodpecker you see here, using traditional stained glass techniques. The oak leaves, ivy leaves and sunrise, however, were created by glass fusing, giving a more abstract flavour to the artwork. All of the glass components were then leaded together, and this was quite a challenge as some of the glass was more than 6 millimetres thick. And I'm very grateful to the Barley Studio team for their skill and inventiveness. The last window I'm going to show you very much resonates with the title of tonight's talk, Old Craft, New Art, and was completed during the pandemic lockdown. The window celebrates St. Cuthbert's and is inspired by the Lindisfarne Gospels and the wonderful stories attributed to this great northern saint. Cuthbert lived for many years as a hermit on the Farne Islands off the Northumbrian coast. And it is said that when he came out from the water, the otters dried his feet and the birds brought him fish. I was keen to depict this traditional subject matter in a contemporary way, with St. Cuthbert's and the Farne Islands framed by the letter C. C is for Cuthbert, C is for CRAYKE, and C is for Christianity. The letter C is taken from the medieval illuminated manuscript, and the surrounding decoration was also inspired by the Gospels. To the left, we have 2 ravens carrying pieces of lard in their beaks. And the story goes that St. Cuthbert reprimanded the ravens for stealing, and they repented by bringing him a gift of lard, which Cuthbert used to waterproof his visitors' boots. And then to the right is an eider duck, still known as the cuddy duck in Northumberland in Cuthbert's honour. All of my works have a life of their own, evoking light continuously throughout their journey and ours. And finally, I'd just like to thank all my clients, the various governing bodies who allow these windows to go into these wonderful buildings, my supporters, for which there are many, and the Barley Studio team. To have their support and expertise on my creative journey is truly wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. I am back to field some questions for you, and before, I know we can't see everybody and we can't hear them and see their smiles, but if you imagine applause right now, that's what 120 people clapping to thank you for sharing your work. That's what should be happening now, and I'm sure it is happening in our own homes. Thank you, Helen. Some extraordinary details as well, which we're all very delighted to see, and lots of people have said that, so thank you. I kick off with a question. It's quite clear in the body of work that you showed us that you are so competent at turning your hand to figurative work, to abstract work, and it's very varied. You've shown us such a varied body of work there, and I just wondered if, when you go to a commission, whether you have a sense of, oh, this window is going to be figurative, or this is going to be abstract, so what your starting point is for those decisions.
I try and keep open-minded, Jasmine. So I first of all, I think it's important to look and listen, you know, so those are the two things that are in my mind. And I try and go with no preconceptions of what I want to do. And equally, I try and not kind of work out how I'm going to do it. So I let the building and the people and all the 7 points that I mentioned earlier, I let those inspire me. And then something unusual comes out.
Fab. A few other things that have come up in the questions, and I'm looking through now. A couple of people have picked up on your use of colour and wanted to know more about how you select colour. And Roger has asked, is there a consciously spiritual, in the sense of the word spiritual, input into your thinking and your use of colour when you are designing?
I think that anybody who's had art school training will understand about primary colours and complementary colours. So I think you can't ignore the power of putting various colours together. I wouldn't say that I'm driven spiritually by certain colours, because to me they're all in the rainbow, so they all count. But what I am very fortunate to have is an incredible stock of colours to choose from at Barley Studio, mainly because we're a conservation and restoration studio as well. So, you know, I've got kind of 40, 50 years of colours to choose from. And then I'm able to continually add to that collection for maybe specific jobs that are coming up. So I feel very lucky that I've got the stock here at the studio to kind of select from.
Fantastic. Another question which someone has asked, Donna has asked this, and it's something that came to my mind too. You mentioned some of the artistic influences that you had when you were younger and studying, and we wondered if there are any stained glass artists that have inspired you, or if there's any particular stained glass artists that you admire out there.
I have to be honest that when I was a child, I didn't really notice stained glass. For me, it was a little bit like religious wallpaper. It kind of just had a kind of a gentle rhythm to it that didn't really engage. Maybe that, you know, that suited certain times of buildings or what have you, but it didn't really draw me in. So certainly I wasn't inspired by stained glass artists up to probably when I actually got into the profession. I was very much, as you can see, inspired by the medieval painters such as Giotto and Piero della Francesca and Caravaggio, and, you know, paintings was my passion. But certainly later on, I think without a doubt, you know, Patrick's and Patrick Renshins and John Piper, you know, certainly nailed it for me. And I wish, you know, I could see more of that, because the boldness of like things not being to scale, you know, it was fantastic, and the use of colours. So I think they continue to be an inspiration for me, just because they got away with quite a bit. So I like their work very much. And again, another one would be Wilhelmina Geddes. I mean, you know, how she actually handled the figure is quite incredible. You know, they had real grit to them, and you really felt the emotions of the person who was contained within that window. So I think those would be my two at the moment that come to mind.
Fab. And the other thing, of course, is that you've worked in collaboration with a couple of artists, two very well-known Royal Academicians, and people are wondering if there's other artists out there that you would like to collaborate with, or whose work you think would lend itself to stained glass. Tricky question.
I think, yeah, there are some people that I'd like to work with. I don't know if I think their work would adapt to stained glass, but to me that's kind of the challenge, isn't it, to kind of translate kind of their picture, their ideas into glass, but actually translate it faithfully, and not kind of use the constraints of stained glass to somehow kill it through lead and everything. So yeah, there are some. I've not contacted anyone because I've been too busy doing my own work, but yeah, yeah, I wouldn't mention one at the moment, just because I don't want to spiral it off into a direction that I'm not ready to then follow. But yeah, there's a few people I'd definitely like to interpret their designs into glass.
Fantastic. And it's quite clear that each windows, certainly the commissioned windows, is for a different context, needs its own kind of research and development. And in a lot of cases, there's authentic and accurate details in your windows, which must take quite a bit of time to prepare. And a few people have asked how long you might spend in your kind of research and development phase, and what that's like.
Painful would be the word. Yeah, I'll have days or weeks where I'll be trying to think of ideas, and what I'm trying not to do is just place these ideas, but place what the client wants. Like, you'll have this incredible brief, Jasmine, and what I fight against is putting these images kind of dangling in a hole. You know, for me, you can have the best brief in the world, but unless you pull it together, like what Keith Critchlow taught me, and actually make it kind of come forward and actually connect, I think that's what I strive for. So yeah, if that answers, does that answer
it? I think it does. I think it's probably an undervalued or underappreciated thing, isn't it, when people think about making stained glass, how much research time it can take to develop something that a client is happy with, that you're happy with, that fills the brief. You know, a lot of work goes on behind the scenes.
A lot of work goes on behind the scenes, and I think anybody listening who's a practitioner would agree with me. You know, these things don't just happen, and I think maybe what clients, and I'm sure clients know, is that, you know, when they just say, can you just do a sketch, you know, that doesn't just happen. You know, there's a lot of hours and work put into it. And that's when I think I should be a solicitor.
Yeah. Okay, a couple of questions about techniques. A few people asking about this. In the RAF window, there's the wonderful rivets with the photographic glass. And a few people are asking about how you manage to transfer the photographs kind of onto the glass. I don't know whether it's a secret technique. If it is, you can just say it's a secret technique.
Well, I can confidently say that I didn't do it. Proto Studios did it. So they took the images. So what you have behind there is 2 huge sheets of glass, and then just little circular photographs that are actually printed on it. So thanks go to Proto Studios for doing that. Technically, you know, there's a gap between those images and our stained glass. And technically, as far as leading the lenses goes, I thank the great glaziers at Barley Studio, because you know, you had to actually gouge out some wood so that the lenses could sit comfortably, because they weren't flush to the surface of the bench. So that in itself was quite a challenge, and extremely nerve-wracking, because you'll see the divisions on that window are quite big. So so yes, thank you Proto Studios, and thank you the wonderful glaziers at Barley Studio for gouging out wooden benches.
There were several comments on how wonderful the RAF window was, and you might not know the answer to this, but they wondered, apart from open house studios, is there a way in which the public can view that window, because it's in a private club, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, you'll probably I don't know, maybe being nice to the reception and asking them if you can go and look through it. I'm sure you know, we could arrange for people to go and see the windows, certainly.
Sounds like
they've got a wonderful art collection as well, may I say. I mean, they've got some fabulous paintings by very famous people in there as well. I mean, their art collection is amazing. It really is worth a good look.
Sounds like a potential stained glass museum trip when we can go and visit things together again. We'll put it on the list. It'd be wonderful to see that window in flesh. Okay, Helen, we've got time if you're happy to answer a couple more, because they keep coming in.
Very good.
A few people have asked also about your recent kind of experiments in fusing technique that you used in a window, and you went over to America to work with Judson Studios, and they wondered what that experience like, and how you have found combining those fusing techniques in your windows? Is it something that you want to explore further, or that you might explore further?
Yes, I did this class with Narcissus. I mean, I went out to America for a few weeks and worked with some super artists. Kathy Jordan, you know, did some painting with her, Judith, and then Narcissus. And I mean, I learned so many techniques that were absolutely fascinating. But I think the fusing was really something I wasn't familiar with, or should I say I was, but I wasn't quite sure about it, you know. So I didn't know how it could work, but when we did the workshop with Narcissus, he showed me kind of what you could do with all these frits and powders and glass, and I got excited. It was like almost doing your degree again, you know. You kind of, as they always say, a child in a sweet shop. And but I somehow I didn't want to just go, as it were, full fused. I wanted to see how. I'm keen to always bridge the gap between the traditional and the contemporary. You know, that we're often kind of divided in this profession. So I kind of wanted to gently introduce this new fusing technique with the traditional glass. So Justin Studios were incredibly supportive. I mean, I really, I worked extremely hard under the directorship of Narcissus, and it was good. It was pretty stressful at times because I had no idea what I was doing. And for anyone who does fusing, the before and after look considerably different. So, but yeah, I think I will use it again. I think there's a lot of positives about the technique, and certainly I think it could apply to stained glass as well.
Fantastic. Okay, a couple more, I think, since we have some time. Is there a particular project that you feel emotionally connected to? And someone else asked, do you have a favourite commission, and what about it is your favourite? So those two questions may be similar. Is there a project that, you know, from start to finish you feel very was a wonderful experience, or just a memorable one that you feel most connected to?
I wouldn't say I have a favourite commission. There's some things that maybe are easy to do than others, but I relish kind of the challenges and all the rest of it that's attached to these projects. But I'd say what's been quite important recently is I showed you the window for CRAYKE, St Cuthbert's Church in CRAYKE, and that window actually was passed by York DAC just before the lockdown. Now, the story attached to this window, which is kind of a motive for me, is the man who has commissioned it has got terminal cancer, and he might still be alive, but it's been touch and go all through doing that window. And I think a positive from the pandemic is that I probably wouldn't have finished that window in his lifetime. So for me to have that project during a very difficult time for all of us, and for me and, you know, the team to be focused on that and to deliver it and get it fixed within this, you know, this difficult time, and for him to see it has been really a positive and equally sad experience. So I think that this will be a memorable window for me, just because I've achieved something that I really didn't think I'd do.
Fantastic. That's a lovely story, and also it answers someone else's question, which is, how has your lockdown been?
Yeah, it's been well, I've been busy. I've been doing that window, so I guess it's been reflective, I'd say, for most people. It's been productive. Yeah, I think it's same as most people, but I just feel pleased that I've managed to, you know, do something within the lockdown for this gentleman. So I think that's beyond lockdown for me.
Fantastic. One final question then, Helen, which is a great question, and it comes from Suzanne, Master of the Worshipful Company of Glaziers. If you had one piece of advice to give to new and emerging stained glass artists, what would it be?
I think that you've got to believe in yourself. It's really important that you do that, because many people will try and throw you off course. I think you need to always be open-minded to the things that are coming your way. Certainly with stained glass, I think there's nothing worse than someone telling you what a stained glass window should look like. I think that you've got to, I would really strongly advise that you get work experience in some of the leading stained glass studios in the country, because for me, what I realised when I was doing my degree is that I had absolutely no practical skills to offer a company if they were to take me on. So I mean, the Worshipful Company of Glazes is fantastic on that, because they have the Ashton Hill Award and the Award for Excellence that actually pay studios for students to be able to go and do work experience in these. So I think the Worshipful Company are doing great things in that respect. So yeah, look at the Worshipful Company website and yeah, keep going, just keep going.
Fantastic. Well, we are very, very grateful to you, Helen, for sharing so much of your work and such varied work in such great, glorious colour and detail, and for bearing with us while we set up the technical challenges that is giving our first online lecture. We're delighted that you were able to do that for us. Thank you to all of you for joining too. Really, really wonderful to have so many people. If Helen would just move to the last slide for me. We have put up the museum website, which you can go to if you want to find out more about what the Stained Glass Museum does. And go to our website. It's www.stainedglassmuseum.com. We are currently closed during the coronavirus, but we do hope to reopen late summer, and we're delighted that we are able to run this event and have you all attend. So thank you all very much. Have a good evening, and thank you very much, Helen Whittaker.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.